Does the reality of evil in the cosmos, does that by itself logically imply that there is no God? That's the question that we're going to look at in this lecture. And to really consider this issue, we need to first get some central terms on the table, terms that all philosophers use when they discuss this issue. First, we have to distinguish moral evils from natural evils. So moral evils include things like morally wrong actions, like, for instance, stealing, or murder, or rape. Moral evils could include just having bad character, being a liar, being a cheater, being violent, being cruel, and so on. Whenever there's a moral evil, there's somebody that's to blame for it, and it has something to do with the free actions of free agents. In contrast, a natural evil, you might even want to put the word evil there in quotation marks, because you might not think that these are evils properly so called. A natural evil is some sort of pain and suffering which is resulting from impersonal forces. So why is this kid crying? Well, maybe he has a birth defect, and that's not anybody's fault. Maybe he contracted a case of the flu, and that's not anybody's fault. So examples of natural evils include things like disease, natural disasters, insanity. So natural evils are bad occurrences, things which we wish did not happen, and they're not the direct result, or they don't directly involve anybody freely doing what's wrong or anybody having a bad character. So some would say, well, it's not really right to call those evils, but yeah, that's how we use the term in philosophy anyway. Now, it is a little bit puzzling. If this world comes from a perfect God, then why is there evil? And you have to distinguish two kinds of answers that theists give. Sometimes a theist will only give, that is, a monotheist will only give a defense, and sometimes they will give a theodicy. So, defense is just a purely negative project. Just like in football, defense, the whole job of it is just to stop the other team from scoring. Uh, a defense is just showing that an argument from evil to atheism isn't cogent. It's not something we know to be sound. So it's just making the case that, hey, your argument for atheism does not work. It's not a successful argument. It should not convince us of atheism. So it's purely a defensive strategy, and some theists think that that's all that they need to do to respond to this issue about evil and God. Theodicy is where you try to go on offense, you try to advance the ball, you try to give some positive answer. So a theodicy is supposed to be a plausible theory about why God allows certain kinds of evils. So we're not just saying, hey, you can't infer atheism from these facts about evil. This is saying, here's why God allows that kind of evil. So very often a theodicy will appeal to free will. why did God let my boyfriend cheat on me? It was so very painful. It was a terrible thing. A theist might say, well, God has given us free will, and because he's done that, he will sit back and allow us to misuse our free will. He couldn't give us free will and then control everything that you're going to do. So that's a theory that's consistent with theism and that's plausible given theism about why God allows a certain kind of evil, namely cheating on your significant other. Of course, there's a lot of different kinds of evils than that in the world. As we just saw, there are natural evils. Anyway, a theodicy is more difficult to give than a defense. You'd have to give a theodicy for the various kinds of evils that there are, and in some cases it would not be obvious what the story would be. Whereas a defense, you're just knocking down the other side's argument, and you're not giving any explanation of why God allows different kinds of evils. So a theodicy is more difficult than a defense, and it's a matter of dispute what a thoughtful, reasonable theist owes us. Do they owe us a defense only, or do they also owe us a theodicy? And we'll look at a defense and a theodicy in this lecture. Now, before we get into further matters, though, I want to talk about what I call some transparently lame theodicies. These are ideas that occur to people as explanations of why God allows evil. And if someone's saying, well, there must not be a God because things occur like the Holocaust or murders, these I think are lame theodicies, that by themselves they're inadequate. They might be true, but I think they're kind of missing the point. So one of these is, God doesn't do evil, he only permits it. Well, yeah, I mean, it was your boyfriend that cheated on you, not God that cheated on you, but the atheist is wondering, well, why did God even permit it? So this really is missing the point. And look, we all agree that a person can be morally blameworthy for something they only permitted but did not do. Suppose I babysit your kids and I say, hey kids, you want to play a fun game? Let's play cops and robbers. And here's some guns I brought over. Why don't you go out in the backyard and you guys be the cops and you guys be the robbers and have a big shootout. And so you come home and all your children are dead. They shot each other all to death. And I say, look, I didn't shoot your children. I only permitted it. Yeah, that's not a good defense, right? So this point by itself doesn't really get us anywhere. Second, transparently lame theodicy. God's ways are higher than ours. Well, as they say in the South, that dog won't hunt. How is this relevant? God's ways are higher than ours. If somebody has an argument that shows that atheism logically follows from the existence of evil, then it just does, and this just seems like a red herring. It's just an irrelevant point. Now this can become relevant to certain kinds of arguments from evil, but on the face of it, it looks like this doesn't do much good. Third, evil doesn't bother me too much. I've had a pretty good life. Well, yeah, maybe you have. Maybe you haven't had to bear up a lot of undeserved suffering, but so, what's wrong with you? I mean, the world is a lot bigger than you. So again, this is just irrelevant. Who are you, O puny man, to question Almighty God? This, I think, is a lame response. And here's one way you can see it. Yeah, there are people that shake their fist at God, and paradoxically, there are sometimes atheists who hate God and are mad at God and bitter against God. But that's interesting. But if the question is God's existence compatible with evil, that's not questioning Almighty God. That's not an expression of bitterness. That's just wondering, could both of those things be true? So there are people, for instance, who are agnostics. They neither believe there's a God nor do they believe there's no God. And they can ask this question, is the existence of God logically consistent with the existence of evil? And there's no, giving the finger to God in that sort of question. Again, this is just kind of irrelevant. Also, you might think this is trying to scare people away from thinking about it. And look, if your religious beliefs require you to scare people because they're so implausible, then, well, maybe you should rethink those. On the other hand, if your beliefs are true, then it should be okay to question them. They should bear up under questioning, shouldn't they? And finally, if there were no evil in the world, we wouldn't appreciate the good. I hear this all the time, and I have to say, I think it's just not true at all. So suppose we took the world as it exists today, and we got rid of all the meanness, all the theft and murder, all the child abuse, and even all the undeserved suffering that's due to disease and natural disaster and just human stupidity. Suppose we could get rid of all the moral and natural evil in the world. What would be left? Well, there'd still be pizza and sex and NFL football and hiking out in nature and music and art. What do you mean I wouldn't appreciate this stuff? Just because nobody had beat me up, I wouldn't appreciate, I don't know, playing soccer? Just because I never tasted anything rotten, I wouldn't like the taste of pizza? That's just nonsense. Now, it is true that there are some pains that heighten pleasure. So if you're really, really hungry, that makes the cheeseburger taste all that much better. And if you enjoy hot salsa like I do, the pain and the pleasure kind of mix, and the pain makes the pleasure better. That's true, but every case of pain isn't a case of evil, moral or natural evil. If there were an evil-free world, there could still be the pain of hot salsa, or the pain you experience when you engage in a good game of arm wrestling. So I just don't think this is true, and I don't think you should accept that this is true. Especially if you're religious, you should not accept this as true, because a lot of religions, like Christianity and Islam, for instance, teach that someday God will get rid of evil. And yeah, we'll still appreciate the good. So this is not a way to defend that sort of religious belief. So we had a reading from David Hume, one of the great philosophers, Scottish philosopher, from his classic book Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, which was published posthumously after his death because it was controversial. And this is a really interesting book, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things from it for you. One is this famous quotation. He says, "Epicurus's old questions have still not been answered. Is he, that is God, is he willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is impotent, lacking in power. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then where does evil come from?" So this does come from Epicurus. And it's interesting, though, it wasn't an argument for atheism in Epicurus. Epicurus, remember, believed in the gods and goddesses because he said all knowledge is based on experience. And people say that they experience the gods, so he believed in the gods. What he didn't believe in was a perfect and provident God like the Stoics believed in, or like Jews and Christians believed in. So he didn't believe in a single, perfect, and all-provident God. He thought that there was no reason to believe in such a being, that the evil in the world provides strong evidence against that. But he wasn't exactly an atheist. Neither was David Hume, although he's the favorite philosopher of many an atheist philosopher nowadays. Here's a quote from the end of Hume's chapter. Hume says, in many views of the universe and of its parts, the beauty and fitness of final causes, that is, purposes that are observed in nature, the beauty and fitness of final causes strike us with such irresistible force that all objections seem to be, as I think they really are, mere fault-finding and trickery, and then we can't imagine how we could ever give way to them. So what he's saying is that natural things seem to be so wonderfully put together, it seems that someone must have designed them that way. He says, but there's no view of human life or of the condition of mankind from which we can smoothly infer the moral attributes of God, or learn about that infinite benevolence conjoined with infinite power and infinite wisdom which we must discover by the eyes of faith alone. So his point is a skeptical point. His point is a point about human knowledge. And he's saying that we cannot infer from what we observe in this world that this world is the production or the creation of a perfect being. Still, Hume says elsewhere that he assumes that the world came from something like an intelligence, one or more intelligences. So he's not exactly an atheist, even though he was very much against religions like Judaism and Christianity.